got to talk about this. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame just announced their nominees for 2025. And wow, this list is incredible. I mean, we're talking about true icons here, the artists who've shaped the sound of generations, you know.
Yeah, this isn't just about popularity or record sales. The Rock Hall really digs deeper than that. It's about lasting influence, about the artists who've changed music history.
And this year, well, they've really outdone themselves. There are 8 first-timers on the ballot, which is always a sign of how the hall is evolving. We've got Bad Company, the Black Crowes, Chubby Checker, Joe Cocker. Are you kidding me?
It's awesome, right?
Yeah.
This really shows how the Rock Hall is broadening their scope. This year, it's a real mix of genres and eras represented. Everything from hard rock to southern rock, from the king of the twist himself to, well, a punk pioneer who brought this whole new energy to the 80s.
Billy Idol, right. I mean, how could you forget Billy Idol? It's like they hand-pick artists from every corner of the music world. And speaking of icons, Mariah Carey is back on the ballot again. 19 #1 Billboard hits. I mean, is that even real?
I know, right? That's got to be some kind of record. And it really speaks to how the Rock Hall is recognizing artists who came up in the MTV era. You know, Chairman John Sykes has said this is totally in line with the true spirit of rock and roll. Rock has always been about diverse influences.
Okay, but wait till you hear this. Outkast and Fish are nominated.
Oh, that's exciting.
Outkast. This Atlanta duo basically redefined hip-hop. I mean, Speakerboxx X The Love Below. That wasn't just an album. That was a cultural phenomenon.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. It won Album of the Year at the Grammys.
Yeah.
And it completely blurred the lines between genres.
Right. And then there's Fish, the jam band kings, known for these legendary live shows. And get this, they were pioneers of online fan communities, like way back in the early 90s, back when most people didn't even have email.
That's wild. They were ahead of their time, for sure.
It's amazing to see how their influence has reached so far. But hold on. We also have Oasis on the ballot. You know, the Britpop kings with anthems like Wonderwall.
Yeah.
And then there's Soundgarden, the grunge pioneers with that heavy, unmistakable sound. And of course, the White Stripes, the minimalist duo that took garage rock to a whole new level.
Jack White once said, "The whole point of the White Stripes is the liberation of limiting yourself." And that kind of sums up their philosophy, right? Finding innovation within constraints. It's so compelling.
Totally. And speaking of breaking barriers, we can't forget about Chubby Checker. The Twist is Billboard's most successful single of all time. All time. Just let that sink in for a second.
Yeah, wow. It really shows how the Rock Hall recognizes more than just musical talent. It's about cultural impact, the songs and artists who become woven into our lives, you know? And that brings us to another icon, Cyndi Lauper, a pop icon who broke down barriers and empowered a generation with her incredible voice and unique style.
I love her. And here's what else I love about this year's nominees. It's not just about the solo acts. We have powerhouse bands like Bad Company, whose members came from other legendary bands like Free and Mott the Hoople. Talk about a rock and roll family tree.
And then there's the Black Crowes, who breathed new life into that southern rock sound with this bluesy edge that's all their own. It's clear that the Rock Hall is acknowledging the magic that happens when talented people come together and create something bigger than themselves.
It's like, I don't know, like they combined the powers of some of the greatest musicians and just, boom, formed a supergroup of awesomeness.
Yeah.
Oh, and we can't forget about Joe Cocker, that gritty, soulful voice. I mean, he could turn any song into an instant classic. Remember his With a Little Help from My Friends at Woodstock?
Oh, absolutely. One of those performances that's just etched into music history. He had this ability to take a song and just completely make it his own, you know? He poured his heart and soul into every performance, and it connected with people on this deep emotional level. It's so true. And speaking of raw energy, how about Billy Idol? He brought punk rock to the MTV generation with his signature sneer and unforgettable hits like Rebel Yell and White Wedding.
Yeah, those songs still get everyone on their feet. And Idol's visual style, it was just as iconic as his music, that platinum blonde hair, the black leather. It all contributed to his larger-than-life persona, the embodiment of a rock star. And guess what? He's still going strong today, even collaborating with artists like Miley Cyrus and releasing new music.
No, that's what I call staying power. But here's something else that's really cool. You, dear listener, you actually have a say in who gets inducted.
That's right. The fan vote is a huge part of the process. You can vote for up to 7 nominees every single day. The deadline is April 21st, so head over to the Rock Hall's website, check out the bios, listen to some music, and make your voice heard.
I mean, this isn't just about us talking about the nominees. You can actually be part of rock and roll history. So, what stands out to you so far? Who are you rooting for? For me, it's the sheer diversity of this year's nominees. It's so exciting. It shows how rock and roll is constantly evolving, pulling from different genres and influencing new generations of artists.
It's going to be a tough choice, that's for sure. But hey, that's a good problem to have. So many incredible artists to choose from. Now, we've talked about the performers, but the Rock Hall also recognizes contributions that go beyond the stage. There are categories for musical influence, musical excellence, and the Ahmet Ertegun Award.
It's so important to shine a light on the people who might not always be in the spotlight, but are essential to the world of rock and roll, like the producers, the songwriters, the session musicians, the folks working behind the scenes to create the music we love.
All right, let's take a closer look at some of these amazing first-time nominees, starting with a band that's been called hard rock's quintessential supergroup, Bad Company.
Ooh, I love Bad.
Right. Their sound is just pure 70s rock. Those anthems were made for FM radio. Feel like making love, can't get enough, shooting star. I can practically picture them blasting from a vintage car cruising down the highway.
Yeah, and don't forget about Paul Rodgers, the lead singer. He's considered one of rock's greatest vocalists. Rolling Stone even ranked him 55th on their list of the 100 greatest singers of all time.
Wow.
I mean, that's not just talent, that's history right there.
It's that raspy, blues-infused voice of his. One minute he's belting out a rocker, and the next he's breaking your heart with a ballad. He's got this crazy amount of range.
Speaking of range, let's shift gears to the Black Crowes. They brought back that southern rock sound, but with a bluesy edge that's just irresistible. Remember their 1990 debut album, Shake Your Moneymaker? It went 5 times platinum.
That album was everywhere.
Yeah.
It's interesting how they've evolved over time. Early on, they drew from bands like REM and The Replacements, but then they really leaned into that classic rock sound with hits like Hard to Handle and She Talks to Angels.
And they were recently nominated for a Grammy for their latest album, Happiness Bastards. Talk about staying power. These guys are proof that classic rock never goes out of style.
Okay, but get this. Chubby Checker. We talked about the twist earlier, but
Yeah.
his impact goes way beyond just one song.
I know, right? He's practically synonymous with the dance crazes of the 1960s. The Fly, the Pony, limbo rock. He brought this infectious, playful energy to music that swept the nation. He was even in movies showcasing those iconic dance moves.
And think about the context for a second. This is the early 60s, a time of major cultural shifts. And Chubby Checker's music gave people this way to, I don't know, like shake things up a bit, to have fun, embrace something new. It's no wonder he became a sensation.
Absolutely. Music has this amazing ability to capture a specific cultural moment, and we see that with a lot of these nominees. They're not just creating music, they're reflecting and shaping the times they live in.
That's so true. Okay, I have to ask, what are your thoughts on Joe Cocker? That voice, that intensity, he was the force of nature on stage.
Oh, Cocker was a master at interpreting songs. He could take someone else's work and make it completely his own, pouring his heart and soul into every note. His voice had this raw, gritty quality that was both powerful and vulnerable at the same time.
Yeah, his version of With a Little Help from My Friends at Woodstock still gives me chills every time I hear it.
It's iconic.
Totally. It's like he was born to sing that song.
Hmm.
Speaking of embodying a spirit, let's talk about Billy Idol. He brought a whole new energy to the punk scene.
He was a true showman, a rebel with a cause. The platinum blonde hair, the sneer, that leather jacket. His image was just as important as his music. And his songs, they had this driving, anthemic quality that was perfect for the MTV era. Rebel Yell, White Wedding, instantly recognizable classics.
And they're still everywhere today. And he's collaborating with artists like Miley Cyrus, proving that punk rock energy never dies.
Yeah, it's about the attitude as much as the music itself. That spirit of rebellion, of challenging the status quo, it'll always resonate with people.
So true. Okay, now we're getting into some artists who are near and dear to my heart. Outkast. These guys were musical visionaries. They weren't just rappers, they were innovators.
Yeah, they weren't afraid to experiment, to push the boundaries of what hip-hop could be. They blended funk, soul, jazz, even rock into their music, creating something truly unique. When Speakerboxx Love Below won Album of the Year at the Grammys, it was a huge turning point.
I agree. It showed the world that hip-hop could be just as complex and sophisticated as any other genre. And they did it with so much style. Outkast's fashion was just as bold and innovative as their music. They weren't afraid to stand out, to be different. And
Yeah.
that's what makes them so iconic.
It's all right there in their name, right?
Yeah.
Outcast. It's about being outside the mainstream, challenging expectations. It's the same quality we see in so many of these nominees, the courage to be themselves, even if it means going against the grain.
And that's what makes them so inspiring. All right, let's talk Fish. If Outkast is about pushing boundaries in hip-hop, Fish is doing the same thing in the world of jam bands.
Right. They're legendary for their live shows, the kind where the music stretches for hours and just takes you on this incredible journey. And they have this dedicated fan base, the Fishheads, who travel all over the country just to experience that energy, that connection.
It's like a shared ritual, a communal experience that goes beyond just listening to music. And the cool thing is, they were way ahead of their time when it came to connecting with fans. They were building online communities back in 1991. I mean, think about it. That's way before social media even existed.
It's incredible. They were true pioneers, both on and off the stage. They understood that music has this unique power to bring people together.
They're like, I don't know, the Pied Pipers of rock and roll, leading their fans on these amazing musical adventures. Okay, we still have Oasis, Soundgarden, the White Stripes, and more to discuss, but I think we've already established something pretty amazing. This year's nominee pool is an incredible testament to the power and the diversity of rock and roll. It's a genre that's constantly evolving, drawing inspiration from new influences, pushing creative boundaries. And these nominees, new and returning, they all embody that spirit of innovation and rebellion that makes rock so powerful.
I couldn't agree more. And it's so exciting to think about how these incredible artists will continue to shape the future of rock and roll, inspiring generations to come.
Absolutely. Speaking of shaping the future, let's talk about Oasis. These guys took the 90s by storm with their brand of Britpop. Anthems like Wonderwall and Don't Look Back in Anger. I mean, they were everywhere.
Yeah, they had this swagger, this undeniable attitude that made them both loved and criticized. And the Gallagher brothers, Liam and Noel, were notorious for their public feuds, just as much as they were for their music. It was all part of the mystique.
They were like a modern-day Beatles and Stones, only with a lot more brotherly brawls. And speaking of channeling the spirit of rock's past, let's talk about Soundgarden. These guys were pioneers of the Seattle grunge scene, and their music had this dark, heavy energy that resonated with a whole generation.
Oh, yeah. Chris Cornell's voice, it was just incredible. He could deliver these haunting melodies one minute and then unleash these gut-wrenching screams the next. Songs like Black Hole Sun and Spoon Man became anthems of the entire grunge era.
Right. They weren't afraid to experiment, to push the boundaries of rock music. And Cornell's lyrics, they often delved into these themes of alienation and introspection, which spoke to a generation that was, I think, feeling a little lost and disillusioned with the world.
Totally. And then we have the White Stripes. This minimalist duo proved that less can truly be more. Just Jack and Meg White, a stripped-down setup with drums and guitar, and this raw, blues-infused garage rock sound that just grabs you.
I mean, it's amazing how much power they packed into just two people. Seven Nation Army. With that iconic riff, it's become this anthem played everywhere from stadiums to protests. You just can't deny their impact.
Yeah, their visual style was just as striking as their music. That red, white, and black color scheme, the simplicity of their setup, it all contributed to their mystique.
It was like they were this, I don't know, like a living, breathing art installation.
Yeah.
And Jack White's guitar work, it's legendary. He's a master at creating these raw, distorted sounds that are both beautiful and chaotic at the same time.
And you can't forget Meg's drumming. It may seem minimalist, but it provided this perfect backbone for their music. It was all about raw energy, raw power.
Like a musical tornado ripping through the music scene, leaving a lasting impact.
So what does it all mean? What can we take away from this incredible group of nominees?
I think it shows that rock and roll is constantly evolving. It's about breaking boundaries, experimenting, and reflecting the times we live in. And these nominees, from the newcomers to those who've been nominated before, they all embody that spirit of innovation and rebellion that makes rock so vital.
Music has this incredible power to connect us, to inspire us, and to challenge us. It makes us dance, it makes us think, and it can make us feel things on a really deep level.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's 2025 nominees, I want to leave you with this thought. Who speaks to your soul? Whose music has shaped your life?
Because that's what the Rock Hall is all about, celebrating the music that's moved us, inspired us, and made us who we are.
So go listen to their music, explore their stories, and most importantly, cast your vote. Be part of rock and roll history.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, Bad Company, they're a true powerhouse. Formed in London back in '73, their members came from already legendary bands like Free and Mott the Hoople. Talk about rock and roll lineage.
I know, right? It's like rock royalty. And their sound, it just screams classic 70s rock, you know? Those anthems were practically made for FM radio. Feel Like Making Love, Can't Get Enough, Shooting Star. I could practically hear them blasting from a vintage car cruising down the highway, windows down.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And don't forget about the vocals. Paul Rodgers, a lot of people call him the Voice, is considered one of rock's greatest singers. Rolling Stone even ranked him 55th on their list of the 100 greatest singers of all time.
Wow, that's impressive.
That's not just talent, that's history.
It's that raspy, bluesy voice that gets me. He can belt out a rocker 1 minute and then just break your heart with a ballad the next.
Yeah.
He's got an insane amount of range.
Speaking of range, let's move on to the Black Crowes. They brought back that southern rock sound, but with this bluesy edge that's just so captivating. Remember their 1990 debut album, Shake Your Money Maker?
Oh yeah, how could I forget?
It went 5 times platinum.
That album was huge. And it's cool how they evolved over time, you know. Early on, they were drawing from influences like REM and The Replacements, but then they really leaned into that classic rock sound with hits like Hard to Handle and She Talks to Angels.
Right, and let's not forget, they were recently nominated for a Grammy for their latest album, Happiness Bastards. Now that's what I call staying power.
Yeah,
These guys are proof that classic rock never goes out of style.
it really doesn't. Okay, but get this. Chubby Checker. We talked about the twist earlier, but his impact goes way beyond one song, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. He's practically synonymous with those 1960s dance crazes, the fly, the pony, limbo rock.
Yeah.
He brought this fun, playful energy to music that, well, it swept the nation. I mean, he was even in movies showcasing those iconic dance moves.
Yeah, and you have to think about the context. This is the early 60s, a time of some major cultural shifts, right? And Chubby Checker's music, it gave people a way to shake things up a little, to have fun, to embrace something new. It's no wonder he became such a sensation.
Totally. It's amazing how music can capture a cultural moment like that so perfectly. It's a theme we see with a lot of these nominees. They're not just creating music. They're reflecting and shaping the times they live in.
It's true. So, okay, I got to ask, what are your thoughts on Joe Cocker? That voice, that intensity on stage, I mean, he was a force of nature.
Oh, man. Joe Cocker. He was the master of interpreting songs, you know? He can take someone else's work and just completely make it his own, pouring his heart and soul into every single note. His voice had this raw, gritty quality that was both powerful and vulnerable.
Yeah. I mean, his version of With a Little Help from My Friends at Woodstock, it still gives me chills.
Oh, yeah, that's iconic.
That's like he was, I don't know, like destined to sing that song. Speaking of embodying his spirit, let's talk about Billy Idol.
Yeah.
He brought a whole new energy to the punk scene.
He was a true showman, a rebel with a cause. That platinum blonde hair, the sneer, the leather jacket, his whole image, it was just as important as his music. And his songs had this driving anthemic quality, perfect for the MTV generation. Rebel Yell, White Wedding, you hear those songs and you instantly know who it is.
And they're still everywhere today. And he's still collaborating with artists like Miley Cyrus, which I think shows that that punk rock energy is timeless.
Right. It's about the attitude as much as the music itself. That spirit of rebellion, of going against the grain, it'll always resonate with people.
I agree. Okay, let's talk Outkast. These guys, they were musical visionaries. I mean, they weren't just rappers, they were true innovators.
Yeah, they were fearless when it came to experimenting, pushing the boundaries of what hip-hop could be. They blended funk, soul, jazz, even rock into their music, creating something totally unique. When Speakerboxx Sex the Love Below won Album of the Year at the Grammys, it was a huge moment, not just for them, but for hip-hop as a genre.
Definitely. It showed the world that hip-hop could be just as complex, just as sophisticated as any other genre. And they did it all with so much style, too. I mean, Outkast's fashion was just as bold and innovative as their music. They were never afraid to stand out, to be different. And that's what makes them so iconic.
It's all there in their name, right? Outkast. It's about being outside the mainstream, challenging expectations. It's that same quality we see in so many of these nominees, the courage to be themselves, even if it means going against the grain, you know?
Absolutely. Okay, now let's talk about Phish. If Outkast pushed the boundaries of hip-hop, Phish did the same thing for jam bands.
Absolutely. They're legendary for their live shows, those epic performances that can go on for hours, just taking you on this musical journey. And their fans, the Phish heads, are so dedicated. They travel all over to experience that energy, that connection.
Yeah, it's like a communal ritual, a shared experience that goes way beyond just listening to a band. And they were so ahead of their time when it came to connecting with fans. I mean, they were building online communities back in 1991. Think about that, before social media even existed.
Seriously, they were true pioneers, both on and off stage. They understood that music has this incredible power to bring people together.
It's like they were the, I don't know, the Pied Pipers of rock and roll, leading their fans on these musical adventures. Okay, we still have Oasis, Soundgarden, the White Stripes, and more to discuss, but I think we've already seen something really special with this group of nominees, wouldn't you say?
What's that?
This year's nominee pool, it's just incredible. It's a testament to the enduring power and the diversity of rock and roll. It's a genre that's always evolving, always drawing inspiration from new places and pushing creative boundaries. And these nominees, both new and returning, they all embody that spirit of innovation and rebellion that makes rock so powerful.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's just so exciting to think about how this diverse group of artists will continue to shape the future of rock and roll, inspiring new generations of musicians and fans.
You got that right.
It's true. Their minimalist setup, that red, white, and black color scheme, it all added to their mystique.
I know, right? Like they were this walking, talking art piece.
Yeah.
And Jack White's guitar work, it's in a league of its own. He's a master at creating these raw, distorted sounds that are somehow both beautiful and chaotic.
Yeah, and Meg's drumming, too. It might have seemed simple on the surface, but it provided this perfect foundation for their music. It was all about that raw energy, that pure power.
Like a musical tornado, just
Yeah.
tearing through everything and leaving this lasting impact.
Exactly. So I guess the question is, what does it all mean? What can we learn from this amazing group of nominees?
For me, it really shows us that rock and roll is always evolving. It's about pushing boundaries, experimenting with sounds, and reflecting the times we live in. And all of these nominees, the first-timers and the veterans alike, they all capture that spirit of innovation and rebellion that lies at the heart of rock.
Absolutely. Music has this power to connect us, to inspire us, to challenge us. It can make you want to dance, it can make you think, and sometimes it can just hit you right in the feels.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's 2025 nominees, I want to leave you with this. Who speaks to your soul? Whose music has had a real impact on your life?
Because that's what the Rock Hall is all about, right? It's about celebrating the artists and the music that have moved us, inspired us, and made us who we are.
So go out there, listen to their music, learn their stories, and most importantly, cast your vote. Be a part of rock and roll history.